Jean, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, I was going over your MO, and I know you use this word energy alchemist, and alchemy is one of my favorite new words. I say new, I mean, it's an ancient word, but like it's only been within the last few years that I've really come to know what it means on a soul level.
Yeah.
And this is kind of throwing you into that spotlight with this, or kind of throwing you in the fire with this, but how would you define alchemy?
Yeah, I think of alchemy as sort of transmuting something into something different. So when I approach some energy, especially if there's trauma or underlying trauma in the body, stagnancies in the body, I think of it as not necessarily removing it or trashing it or getting rid of it, but let's nurture it into something different, something lighter, something brighter. So to me, alchemy is moving something from one thing into something different.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the spiritual transformation process too.
Yes.
Yeah, there's an alchemical process. I don't know if you've studied Carl Jung and what he talks about soul alchemy. And for me, it's the metamorphosis from the caterpillar to the butterfly, and that's alchemy, the soup.
Yes.
Literally the caterpillar soup, which I feel like everyone's in.
Yes, I was going to say that same thing.
You told me something super interesting before we started recording, because you're like, I have a little cough. I'm like, me too. And I'm like, I had COVID like 3 weeks ago, and you're like, me too.
Me too.
And then you said something else interesting. What was that?
Yeah, I said it seems like so many people that have been on this path for a while or are in a particular vibrational state, it seems like everybody has had COVID recently, and it's all come within the same time frame. It's been blowing my mind. And new people that I'm speaking with on podcasts that are kind of in the spiritual realm, all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I had COVID last month. I'm just seeing this as sort of a pattern that's coming out right now. So it's got me wondering what's going on. And I feel like at first when I got it, I thought, okay, I get the antibodies now. And, for whatever else is coming, it up levels our immune systems, whatever. But then I was like, what? There's something bigger going on. And I haven't been able to tune in yet to see
Well,
or
if you
to
figure
understand.
it out, let me know.
I will. I will. There's something interesting happening.
So you teach a lot of this energy shift, really, the inner alchemy, the up level, let's just say, the upgrade.
Yeah.
I look at it as kind of like a computer reboot,
Yes.
paddles on the heart thing when you're at the doctor.
For sure.
The heart thing. I don't even know. How did that show up for you? Like what brought you into this work? How did you have this knowing of what your path was with this?
Yeah, it's been kind of my own personal lifelong journey, and evolution has just helped me to evolve into my work as well. I grew up in a very, very toxic household. I mean, cruelty started at 3 days old and didn't stop for years. So when you experience a lot of trauma early on, you become really good at reading the room. You have to see if you're going to be safe, how you can respond to things or react to things so that someone else doesn't, blow up. So you get just really good at reading other people's states of being.
For survival.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like this started early on, and it didn't become a gift until I started my own healing journey of what is going on inside of myself. What kind of limiting beliefs am I holding on to that continue to perpetuate toxic relationships and abundance blocks and all these other things? So I definitely got to a pinnacle in my life in adulthood where I was realizing I was drawing in a bunch of things that I just didn't want. And I realized that if I was really awesome at creating everything I didn't want, I would probably be just as good at creating what I did.
Like if you became intentional. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a long journey, and it's been decades of unfoldment of all kinds of things. Lots of big, big life lessons. And I still, even now, especially coming into this year, we're all going through, I think, the depth of things that we haven't been able to reach quite yet. Just because the collective consciousness hasn't been in a place to really be able to support that yet. But I feel like we're in this amazing place now where we really can make some big shifts. So my work just kind of is reflective of my own personal journey mostly, and the wisdom
as
that I gained
as
from
it
those
is
things.
for everyone who steps onto this path of,
Yeah.
you could call it light worker, healer, conscious soulpreneur, whatever.
Yeah.
all of us who are sort of on this path of, okay, I want to be part of the change. I want to be a voice for the voiceless. I want to be part of this up level of the conscious collective, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there's always an initiatory path. There's always a rite of passage. It's usually through trauma, I'm sorry that you had experience, but yet I'm not, because
Yeah.
it alchemized you, right?
Yeah.
It made you, it galvanized you really into
Right.
doing the work that you do. So let's start with talking about, this really piqued my interest when I saw your bio, about shifting your timeline. So if you want a certain outcome and you feel like you missed your window, because I run this a lot. I run this program of there's not enough, there's so much to do and not enough time. My mom said that when I was a little girl, I was always running this, like, just running out of time. It's been a big theme in my life. Like, I'm not going to have enough time to do all the things I want to do. Too many books, too little time. Like, I have FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, and so it's been an interesting lesson for me to come into trust.
Yeah.
So, and I have heard of shifting timeline and expanding time and things like that. But how do you teach that? What's your understanding of that?
Yeah. Well, one little detour I want to take before I get into that. I used to run around like a crazy person with this time challenge too, just for the daily aspects of time. When my girls were little, I used to run around thinking there's just not enough time in my day, not enough time in my day. And I would feel so stressed all the time about getting things done. And I realized I was doing that. And I thought, why am I continuing to perpetuate that? And so every time that thought came in of overwhelm, or I don't have enough time, I would stop myself in that patterning and I would say, I have plenty of time. I have plenty of time. And I would really own it and claim it and feel it in every single cell of my being. And literally within 2 days, my entire reality shifted, where everything was done. I had plenty of time. And so you can use that, like, for daily things, but also for the grander scheme of life, to remember we have plenty of time, and everything that we're meant to experience, we can, if we claim that. But we get so busy and spinning out and all the things that we think we're supposed to do that prevent us from all the things that we really want to do.
Because we're not really living, we're just doing.
Right. And
so is it just kind of like being aware, oh, I'm running this whole time thing again? So is it more of a mindset shift, would you say? Or
it's mindset, but it's also energy. So if you think about how our thoughts create emotions, which then create our vibration, right? So if you're thinking, I don't have enough time, emotionally, you're going to start to feel more frenetic, more frantic, more overwhelmed. And that then creates your vibration of preventing things that you actually want coming in, because you're actually creating like obstacles or blocks, energetic blocks, to even experiencing those things, right? So it is thought, because if you can catch those thoughts early, you can shift them into something that you prefer. And then you allow that feeling to also wash over you, which then creates your energetic vibration, which of course then creates your reality, so it's sort of that pathway. So catching the thoughts early is huge in shifting anything, but it's more than just a mantra or an affirmation, because if you're saying things, that you're not believing, you're not really doing yourself any service.
Right. Because everything, feelings are what activate, right?
Yes.
Feelings are what change the frequency. So you have to tap into the feeling, the desired feeling. Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work?
Of course.
Yeah. So my husband and I went to his week-long advanced retreat in Mexico. And it was so amazing and mind-blowing. But one of the things that I think, I've been studying energy psychology for a while, and I understand frequency and vibration, all that. But I think what pulled it together for me is how you can do this with meditation, where, it is an act of surrender. So there's intentionality. Also, there's the unknown aspect, because we want to control the outcome. And this is where my time issue's coming from. And I totally see it. But my subconscious is not convinced yet. So I have to convince, and that is only done through the power of feelings. So you go into the field,
it is,
right? And you access the frequency that you want to create, and you bring that frequency in through meditation and conscious awareness. So anyway, it was a lot of, like, it took, so many notes, but meditating for 4 hours and
Yeah.
it going by, and it felt like a half hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're in it and you're floating and you're exploring, it's so blissfully consuming, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, can I just walk
Mhm.
around feeling like this all the time? Like, and
Right.
maybe that's the goal. Maybe that's the goal, is that your life becomes a walking meditation
Mhm.
or a prayer,
Mhm.
where you're just in that field of, I think the heart field, or the heart centeredness of just being open
Mhm.
and trusting. And to this point, I mean, and I think this is ramping up, and I know you'll back me up on this, because you're very aware of what's happening on the earth.
Yeah.
It's like, all of the shadow aspects of what we've believed, usually
Mhm.
based in fear and guilt in some form,
Yeah.
are being exposed for the illusions that they are.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're all feeling this way. That's why everything is heightened. Um, COVID just happened to just bring that out in spades, right? Of all
Yes.
the things that we're afraid of. But even deeper, there's an examination, a scrutiny, a scrutinizing
Mhm.
of the things we've believed that are not serving us.
Yeah.
And so it's like shaking up. And so when you talk about trust, it's like, well, what am I trusting? Because there's so many unknowns. And then this is the other
Mhm.
thing I learned with Dispenza. He's like, he literally spent hours talking about this in different forms. Um, we've been programmed to fear the unknown,
Mhm.
and it's actually our portal to power.
Yes.
And that's where the trust and surrender comes in. So if
Mhm.
we're so caught up, like me, on the timeline, on the time
Yeah.
aspect, that's so linear, and it
Mhm.
doesn't allow for this beauty and mystery, and this path of the mystic really to come in and show you what's possible, because you're stuck in the old masculine, like, goals and deadlines, and like, I'm
Yes.
53, I should have done this stuff by now, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a
it's the
challenge.
comparing. And I think the expectations of things is what creates a lot of suffering, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes.
If we have expectations, things are supposed to be a certain way and they're not, that increases our level of suffering. But if we release those expectations and just learn to kind of go within, see how we feel, and I think the trust in the grander scheme of things isn't necessarily trusting in someone else or something else, but it's trust within,
Mhm.
trusting your own feelings, getting connected or reconnected with yourself. And you talked about an activation of through meditation before. And I do agree with you that meditation brings in the ability to activate. But if you look deeper, everything that we want and that we have and that we are is already within us. But these pieces within are dormant a lot of times because they're so congested with all these other trainings and things that we've learned and throughout our lives. But if you really want something, it's less about bringing it in, it's more about activating it within,
Mhm.
because when you already have that thing within
Yeah.
you. So sometimes people think it feels so far away and I've got all these expectations of this thing and I just can't reach it. And if we just sit with it and just experience that activation within our heart space and feel it and become that, then we can become a magnet for all of those experiences that we want to have. It's not outside of ourselves, so it's
Such
kind
a
of
good
like that,
point. Yeah.
flipping that switch a little bit. And I find that much more easy to do too, because, you just are getting more acquainted with yourself and trusting who you are as a person. There's so much coming through. I feel like I'm all over the place
No,
right now,
no, it's
but
good. It's good. Totally tracking with you.
yeah, good. I'm sure as we float around in all these places.
But I
But
think that's it. I think the axis, like the midpoint, is really like, everything I'm seeking is already here. I just have to kind of unearth it and
yeah.
remember it.
Hmm.
And even in the physical plane, because we put so much in our exterior world to define our worth or whatever. And I love beautiful things, and I love traveling, and I love doing all the things out here. Ultimately, though, everything has led me back. All
Hmm.
the divine feelings that, like I said, we're all searching for feelings, and feelings are what activate these things. So
Yeah.
ultimately, like, I don't have to leave my house. It's nice to leave my house, but I'm saying my body is the common denominator in everything that I'm trying to discover.
Mhm.
And so I've gotten really, really gun shy about people handing me a set of teachings and beliefs
Mhm.
without running it through my own filters, my own discernment.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, when you were growing up with trauma, in order to survive, you had to kind of almost maybe become an empath, and
Mhm.
like your discernment had to be really sharp just to
Yeah.
stay safe, just to survive, which is that is the gift aspect of trauma.
Mhm.
You become deeply empathetic and deeply empathic. But what I'm finding too is that what wants to rise up in me is this ancient wisdom tradition teaching something that it's just so deep and it's so ancestral, and it's like go back to the very, very fundamental aspects of
Mhm.
life, the quantum, nature, love.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all the stuff you knew as a little kid. But if that process was thwarted for you as a child, if you couldn't access your own innocence and divinity, or weren't, and none of us were taught how to do this really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very rare. And so that's why all these adults are walking around with these wounded inner children inside of us, and we're trying to come back to that basic
Mhm.
trust, surrender, love, wonder, awe, curiosity, all
Yeah.
of those things. Do you have children?
I do. Mhm. I have girls, 3 girls.
Okay, so you get
Yeah.
it. Um, it's there are master teachers in this process.
Yes.
We were once like that too, and we just forgot. So they get to model that for us.
Mhm. For sure. I feel like, bringing up the wounding of people, I was noticing this towards the end of last year that there were a lot of people that were lashing out and feeling a lot of intensity without understanding why. And all of these aspects are coming to the surface so we can see them and manage them, right? So we understand this. Those that are on path kind of understand the process of it. The people that aren't really understanding that there's a reason or purpose for these things surfacing can feel a little bit out of control. And it's almost like witnessing adults having temper tantrums because they're being transported back into those original wounds. And because we didn't have the ability to process these things with sort of that undeveloped mind as a child, those things got stuffed and now they're surfacing, but witnessing that playing out as adults. It's a
Yeah.
really interesting phenomenon to witness. So I think part of the work right now is really understanding that every aspect of discomfort that's coming up is just information. It's
Mhm.
not something to try to run from because a lot of us are trained to bolt from things that don't feel comfortable, that bring fear or anything else. But if we can look at those aspects and just say, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
Something's need a little bit of nurturing, and for people to be able to understand that it's all very purposeful. It's not just to make you feel bad or have suffering
Mhm.
in your life, but it's really an opportunity to work through that stuff. And we talked about ascension, and this is kind of part of that
Yeah, I wanted to go
process.
there next. Yeah, because
Yeah, and I want to
I
jump back
think
to the timeline thing
ascension.
too.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah,
I think they go together, right?
they do.
And
I think so.
ascension is something that's become so misconstrued, and I feel like I had an understanding of what I thought it was growing up, and now it's completely different. So I'm very curious what your teaching is on that.
Yeah, the concepts continue to change, quite honestly. And it's really interesting because as we're moving through the ascension process, we're even realizing that some of the spiritual teachings weren't really complete back then. We're getting new insights on all of these aspects and really able to discern what is true now, what fits to where we're going, and what no longer fits from where we've been. So even the spiritual concepts I find are being challenged now throughout this process.
Yes.
So to me, ascension is moving from a lower density timeline life experience into a higher vibrational experience that includes a different set of almost like rules or experiences or potential within that place. To me, it's letting go of the density of guilt and shame and all of the lower vibrational shadow parts, being able to see those pieces, why they're there, why they've been hidden or tucked, being able to heal and nurture those pieces to, again, transmute them into a greater light force, therefore lifting your frequency. Because as we are higher vibrational beings, we attract in different vibrational experiences. So I think this is the process of ascension in what we're kind of working through. And that's why it's so relevant right now to allow the release and unpacking of all the stuff that doesn't fit, because we can't really drag that stuff with us easily anymore. It's becoming intolerable. And so to be able to see those things and to let that stuff finally heal is really the work right now. And I love it because I've been doing this work for over 2 decades, and I've always felt like a weirdo, like, where are my people? And now everybody is kind of understanding the relevance of energy healing and the more subtle bodies and how all these pieces kind of fit together. And they're more on board with understanding or curious about it. So I'm like, oh, finally more people to play with,
Yeah,
and
it's
everybody's coming
interesting.
with big stuff.
It's interesting. I did a workshop in 2007, and I talked about energy stuff. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Donna Eden. She wrote Energy Medicine,
Sure.
and boy, you would have thought I was the biggest heretic on the planet. I mean, people were just like, I don't know how this fits into my spiritual beliefs. I don't know. And I'm just like, well, light is energy, and it has a frequency. And so, yeah, anyway, it's just interesting how we've evolved. I mean, that was in 2007, but I'm like you, I've been kind of just taking the observer role. I mean, I've been talking about it, but I actually went into hiding with it a little while, just so I could kind of build my business and do different things. And of course, I've still been fascinated with the quantum mechanics of how things work and thoughts and emotions and things. But yeah, you're right. Everyone's talking. Well, not everyone, but there's a general acceptance, I think, now that our emotions create our reality. Our thoughts create our reality. Thoughts have a frequency. Health is connected to this, everything, right? So as soon as I don't say it's not critical mass consciousness yet, but once it does hit that, who knows? I don't know. Do you have a timeline of when you think that will be?
Well, it's funny, even checking into timeline for future, everything is shifting so much
You
that
just can't
there's
nail it down.
no, I've given up on that. And probably the end of 2020, I'm like, I can't even see. There's so much dust in the air and so much, purging and all these things happening that we can't see through the fog right now. And that's okay, because we know we're moving through it. We just can't see where we're going yet. And that's okay to find peace within that experience.
But I think that just like radical self-responsibility and accountability to see, like, it is you, like, it's all in you. So there's that divinity piece of you. There's the human aspect of you. There's that middle path of like, okay, I'm human and divine. Now what? And coming into acceptance. I think that will do away with all this fear and guilt, because we just generally accept we're worthy. Number one, we are worthy. I don't know how we ever, that's the prevailing, don't you think that's like the dominant shadow?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And the worry about things, what came through this morning, I was just sitting outside, just enjoying the air this morning. And I was thinking about my mom, and she likes to worry about a lot of things. And I was thinking, it's so funny that she's worrying about all these things that aren't happening. And it just came through, worry is the result of the belief in worst case scenario.
Which is where anxiety lives.
Right. And so when we, again, kind of check in with those thoughts and see, what are we cultivating within our thoughts and what is that creating within us? Can we stop focusing on the worst case scenario? Because a lot of us have been living worst case scenario. We've literally been living in the dark ages. So of course we're going to believe that that's what's going to continue. And now we're being asked to stop that.
You just create a new reality, really.
Yeah. So it's where we focus is what we're going to create every single time.
Yes, because it grows. What you focus on expands. So what do you do with your clients or people you work with to get them just to kind of like ground level, maybe taking them from like the first step. Is it focus? Is that where you take people? Because when we're talking about creating a new reality, it's going to be a lot of individuals who understand the creation process, who understand that they are creating their own reality. That's a huge awakening.
Yeah, for sure.
So once they're like, okay, it's me, everything I'm searching for is inside me. Everything that's my current reality, I have created. Can't blame anyone. Can't, or my perception has crafted it, because there are people that hurt us. Let's be honest. There are systems and people that hurt us all the time, but we're not really victims until we'll stay victims, I should say, until we realize that, we get to change our perception.
Yeah.
So how do you take people once they're like, oh, it's me, I'm creating this. So how do I not, because all those neural networks and patterns have been laid down, all the habituations. So to tell some, once they awaken, it can be so jolting, because you're like, but I have these habits and I've been thinking this way for so long. How do you circumvent that into the new reality?
It's I work multidimensionally, so it's sort of priorities of the access point is where we go. And for me, it's always the energy, because energy doesn't lie. So, you can talk to somebody and they have their beliefs about the backstory and things like that. But when you start to understand the truth of the whys or the energy underneath that, you can start to move things in a different way. So for instance, even just this morning, I've been working with a lot more teenagers, which I love because this generation moves through things so quickly. And I was working with this kid who's kind of struggling with procrastination, and he can feel he's in resistance to doing things, but he couldn't understand why he was in resistance. And so I go into the energy and explore what's going on in there. So we identify what's happening inside, and we start to change that form within there. So there were a couple different ways that showed up today. But ultimately, when we shift that energy, I can see how that patterning and program is playing out in his reality, and bringing his awareness to what the energy is doing. And all of a sudden, it's like an instantaneous shift because of the awareness of it. It's like, oh, I get it. And now I can choose not to do that anymore.
Yeah, it's almost like you just have to look at it. You have to see it.
Yeah.
And for many of us, it's taken a lot of really painful life circumstances for us to see it. I think it's beautiful when these teenagers and these younger kids are just like, they get it. They're just like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to fight it,
well,
but
less baggage
they
they have than we have, 40s and 50 years later. But it was so sweet. After the session, he said to me, he says, I feel like you're like 150 years in the future, coming in and working through exactly what's not working, instead of trying to suppress it with a medication or a pharmaceutical, or, if you have a headache, take this pill and you won't feel it. He's like, you actually go into the headache and see, why do we have the headache? What wants to move? And for him, his prefrontal cortex was diminishing. It was trying to expand, but he was receiving all this information through the amygdala, through his trauma responses. So it's literally rerouting the way that he receives information so he can use his discernment as opposed to the fight or flight. So it's making those shifts of awareness as to even how his system is functioning. And then because we saw what it was doing, and we tweaked some systems to help encourage it to go back to the natural state of origin, then he has tasks about how to continue to move this in a way that supports him in daily life. We know it's not working. Now we can look at that exact system, and we know exactly what to do to apply to continue to move in the direction we want to go in. But we have to be able to see the stuff. If we can't see it, we're just shooting in the dark.
Off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's the observable. And this is where people have the awakening. Like, I don't know if you follow Eckhart Tolle, but
yeah, sure.
His whole awakening was just like, he recognized there was the I and the me, and it just shifted everything for him. He's like, when I'm saying that I need to change, what is the I, anyway, but it's the observable. It's going within and seeing what's there and allowing it to be what it is. And I know you teach like letting love in, letting and allowing that process. It's not a forced
Yeah.
process. It's a receiving model, right? How do you have your clients allow in that love and abundance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I work with people with the priority of kind of what's creating a sense of discomfort or suffering in their lives, because that's always the things that are ready to be healed, right? So if someone's coming to me and they're saying, I'm really having trouble connecting with my partner or whatever, we'll go in and see the why. And what I find a lot of times, especially with the heart, because it's such a sensitive place, we develop all kinds of interesting defense mechanisms and walls that we place around that. But if you go in and just try to strip the wall away, the reason why the wall was placed still exists within. So people are going to have resistance to letting that drop because the need within is still very active and vulnerable. So we can't just strip something away. So we go in and see, why was that there in the first place? What did you need in that moment that you didn't receive back in the day? How can we shift that energy into some place that feels good and safe and sacred? And then all of a sudden, when you activate that within, the walls fall organically. You don't need to strip anything, but it's going into the actual core of why they were there in the first place. And so that's with everything we do. We create obstacles as defenses, but then the thing happens is that we grow and we evolve, but those protective mechanisms still stay. And they're all rusty and not working, not functional anymore, but they're still there until we look at them and say, maybe we don't need to carry this with us anymore. Let's drop that stuff off. Let's get it, kind of clear through all this stuff and free ourselves into our potential of what we do want to bring in. So it really is, we can't really let things in until we figure out why we're holding things in the first place. So I kind of reverse engineer a lot of the work, just to see the why and then be able to manage, navigate that, and then bring in what we really want.
Perfect. So just to kind of wrap up, let's go back to Ascension, and in layman's terms, I was taught a certain model, which was, if you do these certain things, and let's just say religion, okay? Let's just say the average church model is, if you do these certain things, you'll get these certain things. That, there's promises attached to your performance, really, or your practices. There wasn't as much emphasis put maybe on your state of being necessarily. I mean, obviously Christ-like attributes were espoused and posed, but I'm talking about this exterior stuff. So I always felt like I was climbing a ladder, the ascension ladder model, really, like, if I am worthy, if I do these things, then I'll be worthy. And then I might get to the point where I can possibly, if things line up perfectly, ascend to God. That was my old thing. It's not like that anymore. It's very interesting now, but I'm curious how you teach this essential model, what it really means to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people think that way. We're trained that way, where we have to climb and clamor and do all these things to get to where we want to go. It's this uphill climb and this point that we're trying to get to, and maybe we'll reach it, maybe we won't. And just feel that in your body for the listeners, just to see how that feels.
It's yet.
Right?
Well, it creates more unworthiness.
It does.
Yeah.
And hoping that we'll get there, and feeling like things might just be out of reach. Right. And so it's literally taking those old belief systems, and I'm always needing to climb. I never have enough. All the always and the nevers are always going to be connected to limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are never going to get us to where we need to go, right? Where we want to go. So instead, I really teach about being in the present moment, because if we're always trying to reach and climb and clamor, we're always chasing something. Something's always eluding us, and it always feels defeating. But if you can feel really comfortable and present within yourself, present within every moment, and think about, as opposed to moving into your future timeline, being present in each moment automatically moves you into the future, right? So you're almost like stationary, and the future is coming towards you, through you. So think about the level of relief that you can feel with, I can be right here, right now, doing whatever I'm doing in this moment, and I'm literally drawing in what I want towards me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So much less efforting,
Yeah.
right?
It's the
Oh,
magnetism model. It's the allowing, like we talked about earlier, allowing the love, allowing the abundance, which is kind of like this opposite of resistance.
right.
Um, and that I think before people can get there, they have to see what, okay, in order for them to be motivated to get into these places of like, okay, I'm going to allow now, I'm
Mhm.
going to receive, I'm going to focus. It's almost like they have to know the cost if they continue to not. So
Mhm.
it's almost like I know what I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do programs for women and coaching and things, and a lot of women that I've worked with are like, coming to me because they want me to tell them what they want.
Right.
And I'm like, well, let's start with what you don't want. You
Yeah.
don't want to feel these certain things. But again,
Mhm.
we're all searching for feelings. That's a frequency we want to bring in. That's everything. It's all energy. We're all energy, and energy is feelings.
Mhm.
And emotions are energy too, but it's a different frequency, right? It's more volatile.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you have these ascension models of climbing and scaffolding to God, really, and structure and for me, the pathway has been a descent model into
Mm.
myself and into
Mhm.
shadow.
Yeah.
And like you said, looking at the headache,
Yeah.
being in it, feeling the
Mhm.
pain, not
Mhm.
masking it anymore.
Yeah.
That is the pathway to ascension. And not that I'm
Mm.
there, but I'm just saying, if, like you said, if we're in the moment and we are very present and we have allowed love in, or we have allowed ourselves to be in a certain frequency, we've ascended in that moment. We are
Yeah.
ascended. So anyway,
Right. And
I look at it
ascending in
differently
every
now. It's not an
moment.
achievement model for me anymore.
Good. I know. Well, and I think we're so trained in those ways, goal setting, you do these things and then you get the satisfaction or the payoff or the validation. That's like the systems. So
Yeah.
all those systems right now within Ascension are breaking down, and all these structures that, again, rickety, rusted foundations that we once tried to rely on, very, very unstable feeling, and always leaving us in chronic worry, chronic stress, chronic fear. All of those things are we're recognizing none of that really works. So
Yeah.
we do want to shift the timeline into something totally different. And within the timeline work that I do a lot of past timeline work. So for instance, if there's someone who had a trauma when they were 7 years old, and we heal in that moment, and then allow that healing to sort of move forward through the timeline, and sort of it, and I don't want to use the word minimize, but I can't think of a better word. Everything that's compounded on top of that starts to also be cleared. So they get profound healing in the present based on the healing that we've done in the past timeline.
Mhm.
And if you find yourself on a timeline now that doesn't feel good, you don't have to stay on that trajectory. You really can say, I don't want to be here. And I'm a visual person, so I like to create visuals to help me move into a different state of being. So if
Mhm.
I'm on a path that doesn't feel good, I'll look at, okay, I'm on this path and all these things are on it that I don't really want to engage with. What if I just turn this way, 20 degrees, whatever. And what's here? What do I want to bring in here? And I start to walk down that path and I feel a difference in what I'm choosing to engage with. So for
Mhm.
me, it's all about choice. Everything that's happening to us is a choice. And if you find yourself in some place that doesn't feel good, go back in and see, what am I choosing? What do I believe that is
Mhm.
leading me to this place? And can I choose something I prefer? And then just take those action steps to start doing it. And that could be, starting to release toxic relationships. It could be doing something more for yourself, even if it's 5 minutes a day. It can be choosing to leave a situation that is, doesn't feel supportive of you. And
Mhm.
those things are scary. I'm not going to minimize, the amount of work and effort it takes to making those big shifts. But just even knowing that this no longer fits and I want something different is the best place to be. Because
Sure.
when you stay in that place, then all of a sudden things will start to come in to help support that movement.
Yeah.
We're so much
Yeah.
more supported than what we think, and we don't have to do everything by ourselves. If we
Yeah.
just align with what we want and let the universe come in, God, whatever your frame of reference is, to help support that, all of a sudden it's like the synchronicities are so blissful. And when you learn that that's available, you never want to stop doing that.
That's such a beautiful way to kind of culminate our conversation. I heard that, the universe rewards courage, and it's just showing up. Like you said, taking that, like seeing, excuse me, visualizing a new path, seeing it and literally stepping into it is so courageous.
Yeah.
And the universe does reward it. So more is added to you, and it becomes it's bigger than what you dreamed it could be. It shows up in different ways you never expected. The universe likes to surprise you. God, angels, whatever, they love to surprise you and give you these abundant gifts. And I'm starting to learn that I just have to get out of my own way. Okay. So how can people find you online, Jean?
Yeah, the easiest place would be my website at jeanatman.com. I offer some group programs. I offer some private work. I will continue to include new opportunities this next year, as well as I have YouTube videos and things like that. People can access that also on my site.
Perfect. Well, I'm grateful that you joined me. This was a really enlightening conversation. It made me like, this whole thing about creating a new reality. The power is within you to create anything. It's a limitless. There are limitless possibilities in the field of consciousness, the quantum field. So I just love the idea of I love people, let me just say, that teach what you're teaching about, just the conscious creation of a new reality. And so I honor you for your work. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I honor you for yours as well. I was very impressed as I was looking at all your opportunities too. I can tell you're making a big, big difference. So it's really an honor to be here with you.
Thank you.